Virgo, the seismograph picked something up 3 days ago. Uh, Not the instrument in your living room. You don't have one of those. The instrument you carry in your body, the one that has been registering micro tremors in the ground beneath a particular area of your life for longer than you've been willing to call it data. The small, irregular, easy to dismiss vibrations that could have been anything, could have been coincidence, could have been your own anxiety reading interference as signal, but that kept arriving at the same frequency from the same direction with the specific repeating signature of something that has a source. Sources produce patterns. Random noise does not. What your body has been registering has a pattern, and the pattern has been intensifying, incrementally at first barely distinguishable from background noise, then less incrementally. Then, in the last 72 hours, with a consistency that even the most determined skepticism would find difficult to attribute to coincidence, something is moving beneath the surface of your life, has been moving for some time, is now moving in a way that suggests the surface event, the moment the ground above the movement expresses what has been happening underground, is proximate. Proximate, close, closer than the comfortable distance from which such things are usually observed. The seismograph is spiking, earth-shattering, two words fused so often they have almost stopped meaning anything individually, but pulled apart, what do they actually describe? Earth, the ground, the thing you stand on, the surface that is so constant, so reliably present beneath your feet, so utterly taken for granted in its stability that you stop noticing it entirely, stop feeling it the way you stop feeling the chair you've been sitting in for an hour. The earth is the thing that does not move, the thing whose steadiness is the premise on which all other movement is premised. You move because it doesn't, you build because it holds. You plan because it will still be there tomorrow in the same configuration it is in today. Shattering, not cracking, not shifting, not the gentle realignment of tectonic plates that produces over millennia the slow drift of continents. Shattering, the sudden, irreversible, non negotiable conversion of something solid into something that is no longer solid. The moment when the premise of stability is withdrawn without warning from everything built upon it. Earth shattering news is news that withdraws a premise, not news that changes a detail within the existing structure of your understanding, not news that requires a revision of one chapter within an otherwise intact story. News that removes a foundational assumption, something you did not know you were building on because the building was so natural, so long established, so completely absorbed into the way you understood your world, and in removing it requires you to look again at everything constructed above it. Oof, to assess what still stands, what was dependent on that specific foundation, what was in fact not as solid as it appeared because the solidity was borrowed from the premise that has now been withdrawn. This is the category of news approaching you. Premise withdrawing news, foundation level news. Where does it come from? The direction the seismograph has been pointing, which is, and I want to be careful here, want to be precise rather than vague in a way that sounds like precision, the direction of a relationship. a person, someone whose position in your life has been, until this point, defined largely by what you believed you knew about them and what you believed you knew was accurate as far as it went. This is important. The understanding you built of this person was not fabricated, not naive, not the wishful projection of someone who saw only what they wanted to see. You read them accurately with the considerable perceptiveness you bring to people, with the attention you pay that most people do not pay. You saw them, but you saw the layer that was presented for seeing. There is a layer beneath it, not a hidden layer in the sinister sense, not concealment for the purpose of harm, not a deliberately constructed false front designed to manipulate, but a layer that was not ready to be shown. That required in this person, for this person, given whatever combination of fear and timing and readiness governs these things, a specific set of conditions before it could surface, before it could become part of what they offered for perception rather than what they kept below the waterline of the known. Those conditions have been met or are in the process of being met or will be met by an event that is itself approaching a trigger, a catalyst, a moment that functions as the last increment of readiness that tips the scale from withheld to expressed. The layer is rising. What the news contains. There are several possibilities, and they are not mutually exclusive. The first is revelation of feeling, the discovery from someone you did not expect it from, or did not expect it from at this magnitude, or did not expect it to be expressible, that the emotional reality of what exists between you is different from what was being maintained on the surface, larger, more committed, more specifically about you in ways that the managed version of the interaction had been obscuring, feeling at a scale that changes the ground beneath the relationship. That requires you to reconsider not just where things stand now, but where they were all along, to look backward with new eyes at a history you thought you had read correctly and find that the reading was accurate, but the interpretation was incomplete. That what you thought was one thing was underneath another. Not a betrayal of the surface. The surface was real, but the surface was only the visible portion of something that extended much further down. The second possibility is revelation of circumstance. News about something material, something practical, something in the external world of this person's life that changes the context in which everything between you has been occurring. Something that explains in the sudden, retrospectively obvious way that good explanations always explain why things have been the way they have been, why certain things were not said, why certain movements were not made, why the configuration of this dynamic has had the specific shape it has had. The circumstance revealed does not change the feeling, it changes the interpretation of the feeling's expression. It translates what looked like restraint into what was actually constraint, what looked like indifference into what was actually obligation, what looked like choice into what was actually navigation, careful, costly, quietly exhausting navigation of a situation that did not permit the choices the feeling wanted to make. The third possibility, and this one sits at a different depth than the others, is revelation of decision. News that is earth shattering, not because of what it discloses about the past, but because of what it announces about the future. News that does not explain, but declares. That does not clarify what has been, but states what will be, what this person has decided in whatever private hours the decision was made about what they want and what they are prepared to do about the wanting. Decisions declared are different from decisions held. Once spoken, they belong to the space between two people rather than to the interior of one. Once spoken, they become something both parties have to navigate rather than something one party can manage alone. The declaration, when it comes, is the shattering. Not because it is destructive, because it is irrevocable, because some ground, once broken, cannot be restored to its unbroken state. Because some things once said cannot be unsaid, and the world in which they have been said is permanently different from the world in which they had not yet been. How to stand when the ground moves. This is the question that matters most and receives the least preparation. We spend enormous energy anticipating what news might arrive, gaming out scenarios, rehearsing responses, building the internal scaffolding of how we will handle various possibilities. We spend almost no energy on the more fundamental question of how we will inhabit our own bodies in the moment when something large lands. How we will breathe, whether we will breathe. How we will stay present when every instinct the nervous system has developed for self protection activates simultaneously and produces, in a person who is genuinely surprised, a state that is physiologically identical to threat response, elevated heart rate, narrowed attention, the specific quality of cognitive shutdown that happens when the processing load exceeds the system's current capacity. The antidote to cognitive shutdown in the moment of earth shattering news is not preparation. You cannot prepare enough. The news is, by definition, beyond the preparation you could have done. That is what makes it earth shattering rather than merely significant. The antidote is contact with your own body. Simple, immediate, unglamorous contact with the physical fact of yourself. The feet on the floor, the breath moving, the hands, which in moments of shock tend to become uncertain of themselves, give them something to hold your own arms. The edge of whatever you are sitting on, something real, something that communicates to the nervous system. The body is still here. The body is not in danger. The body can receive this because the body can receive this. It has received harder things. It is built for reception, for the processing of enormous input through the specific, evolved, deeply competent mechanism of a human being encountering something that requires recalibration and surviving the recalibration. Your nervous system has done this before. It knows how. It will do it again in the moment when the news lands and the ground shifts, and the premise you did not know you were standing on turns out to have been the premise you were standing on. Trust the body to know how to stand in moving ground. It has been practicing for exactly this in every smaller recalibration that preceded it. The specific quality of earth shattering news about love, because that is what the heart in the title is doing there. It is specifying the category. It is saying, this is not news about the world. This is news about the world as it pertains to the most interior territory you carry, the territory of who matters to you and whether you matter to them, and in what way, and at what depth, and for how long, and with what future. Implied love news is different from other news because it lands in a place that other news cannot reach. You can hold financial news at a slight intellectual distance. You can process it through the part of you that calculates and plans and responds strategically. You can hold political news at an even greater distance and can engage with it through analysis, through the part of you that relates to the world as something to be understood rather than something you are directly, personally constituted by. Love news bypasses all of that, goes directly to the place where you keep the things that actually matter. The place that is not analytical, not strategic, not capable of the managed distance that intelligence usually provides. The place that simply feels, that has no defense except presence. That receives what it receives in the full, unmediated, completely exposed way that the most central things in a human life are received. When the news is about love, when the earth shattering thing is a revelation of how someone feels about you, or a declaration of what they intend, or a disclosure of what has been true beneath the surface all along, the ground that moves is not just the ground beneath your circumstances. It is the ground beneath your understanding of yourself as someone who is or is not loved in a particular way by a particular person. That ground, when it moves everything above it. The self concept, the expectations, the quiet accommodations you made to what you believed was the reality of the situation, the subtle self management, the careful calibration of how much you allowed yourself to want, the specific way you held certain possibilities at a safe distance to protect yourself from the cost of wanting them too openly. All of that gets recalibrated when the ground moves. Not painlessly, not quickly, but completely. After the news arrives, there will be a period, it may last hours, it may last days, that has the specific quality of the hours after a significant seismic event. The initial shock has passed. The immediate physical response has moved through, and what remains is the strange, disorienting, almost surreal experience of moving through a world that looks identical to the world before the event, but that, in the place where you keep unambiguous knowledge is not the same world, cannot be, has been changed at a level that the visible surface has not yet caught up to expressing. You will look at the furniture in the same positions and the sky the same color and the ordinary machinery of your day, proceeding with complete visual indifference to what just changed, and you will feel the gap between the unchanged exterior and the fundamentally altered interior as one of the stranger human experiences available. Let it be strange. Do not rush to normalize it. Do not compress the processing time in the name of getting back to ordinary functioning. The strangeness is the sign that something real happened, that the news did what earth-shattering news does, which is to alter the premises at depth. And altered premises take time to propagate upward through all the structures built above them. Give them the time. Give yourself the time. The new ground is real. It is solid. It will hold you the way the old ground held you, which is to say, completely, without asking anything in return. But it is new ground, and new ground, however solid, requires the feet to learn it, to feel for its specific topography, to understand where it is firm and where it has give, to build confidence in its bearing capacity through the actual physical, irreplaceable experience of walking on it. Walk on it, slowly at first, with attention, without the automatic confidence that comes from familiarity, because this is not familiar yet. But with the reasonable expectation that familiarity comes from use, and use comes from the willingness to place your weight on something new and trust that it will hold. It will hold. What is about to be revealed to you, whatever form the shattering takes, whatever the specific content of what has been moving beneath the surface of this particular area of your life, is not going to leave you standing in rubble. It is going to leave you standing in truth. And truth, however disorienting its arrival, is always better ground than the most comfortable fiction. The seismograph is spiking, Virgo. The micro tremors have become something else, something that the body registers not as background noise, but as signal, as information, as the specific, unmistakable communication of a ground that is about to show you what it has been holding beneath itself for longer than the calm surface suggested. You are about to hear something. Is less than #0. 5 hashes greater than. And when you hear it, when the premise shifts and the ground moves and the world reconfigures itself around the new information, remember this: the shattering is not the ending. It is the exposure of what was real beneath what was maintained. And real things, exposed to air, do not dissolve. They consolidate, they clarify, they become, in the light that the shattering let in, more themselves than they could ever have been in the carefully managed dark that preceded the break. Be prepared, Virgo. Not with armor. We have been through this enough times now to know that armor is the wrong preparation. With presence, full, awake,